Hello, soulmates. Welcome to the final part of our class. Welcome to the transfer and finishing of our class to the sewing. Of course, you're going to sew this. Okay, so for us to transfer this is our master pattern. The main bodice on the main paper is our master pattern. We do not want to cut on this paper. We want to transfer to another paper to cut and sew so that whenever we need to do something else with the pattern, we always come back to here. We will not start drafting the basic bodice afresh. This is one benefit of pattern drafting. Once you have it on your paper, once you have the master pattern, you can always come back to use it to do many other things that you desire to do. Of course, every other design that you're going to be working on in future depends on this basic bodies. So whatever it is that you desire to do, you always come back here, take your basic bodies and then alter it to whatever you choose to do. So under here I have a plain paper which I'll be transferring all of these markings to. And then here I have fabric. This fabric is just to help me to see my tracings very well. So I'm going to be using my tracing wheel. I'll make sure the patterns or the papers match up very well. No part is bigger or shorter. I'll make sure everything matches properly. So once I make sure the papers are matching correctly, I'm going to start from one part so that I don't get to miss out on any lines that I've drawn, which I'm supposed to transfer to the working pattern or to the next paper. Okay, so from one side, you can go horizontal, you can go vertical, but make sure that every single line on this pattern is traced out. So I'll begin from this part. Once I'm done, I'll go back to another line until I'm done with it. So I'm just going to show you how to do this, but I'm not going to be transferring to another paper. I already have plenty of basic bodies. I'll be cutting on this paper directly. Okay, so for us to do this, all we have to do is to use our tracing wheel. Make sure we identify the lines that we want to transfer and simply roll over this way on the line. Make sure you're not missing it out. I hope you can see what I'm doing. Right, we're going to do this down to the end. Make sure you're not missing, your hands are straight down to the end. You come over, or you can decide to trace the borders at once if you want to trace the borders. I'll come over to this place and trace this. Carefully, I'll come over to here. I'll trace this. I'll trace this part. Okay, so this is what you're going to do on all your markings. This is what you're going to do on all, everywhere that you have a pencil, you're going to do this. Right, so once this is done, we're going to remove it and cut on our pattern. Now before cutting on this pattern, looking at the bust area, the dart at the upper part is quite close to my bust line, and that is because of my measurement. Yours might not be like this, but once you have your dart close to your bust, your true bust line, it might not be proper for you to sew the dart up to that point. It's going to affect the bust. Okay, normally we should have 2 centimeters away from the true bust line, both up and down. So from the true bust line, we came down 2 centimeters to connect our dart. At the upper part too, we should have 2 centimeter distance from the dart. So once you measure and you realize you don't have up to 2 centimeters, you can always withdraw your dart to make sure it does not affect the bust. right? It's just a small line, just a small thing. So from there you can redraw your bust so you don't get to sew to the point that is very close to your bust. I hope this is clear to you. This is going to happen after you have transferred your um, body to another paper. Once you have transferred to another paper, you're just going to do this so that when you're holding this, you know where to stop your sewing. Every other thing remains the same. Okay, so we're going to cut and transfer to our fabric while we sew. Just to let us know that it is also possible to cut the whole of this out instead of just sewing only here and then the darts. You can decide to cut the darts away, then add your sewing allowance and sew, or you can decide to just sew what is inside the darts and it's okay like that. Whichever one you choose. I believe we all know how to join our fabrics together, and that is what we're going to be doing. When cutting this front shoulder, you can follow this um, shape here, or you just close it the way you closed it before and cut on the shoulder line, which is this one. So you could also, you have this to help you fix the shoulder well. So now, like I said, we can decide to cut it out entirely, add our sewing seam allowance of ½ inch and so, or we can just decide to transfer it the way it is and so. So I'm going to be transferring this to fabric and resew. So here I've placed the front part on my fabric, which is folded into two. The center front is on fold, it's not going to be left open. So at the hem part here, 1 to 2 inches for folding allowance at the lower part, 1 to 2 inches for folding allowance. By the side, ½ inch to 1 inch or 1.5 inch. I usually do 1 inch by the side. It depends on what you're able to hold, but whatever it is that you add, make sure that you remove it while sewing. Remember, it is just sewing allowance. So by the side here, 1 inch to 1.5. This is a basic bodice that is already free, so 1 inch basically is enough by the side. Then by the armhole, we have ½ inch sewing allowance. ½ inch sewing allowance, that is for the standard, and this comes if you're going to be adding sleeve or if you're going to be piping it or whatever. But if you're not going to do anything on this part, there will be no need for seam allowance or sewing allowance, right? But if you're going to be piping, finishing, doing anything with the ½ inch, that's when you'll be adding the ½ inch. Then on the shoulder part, we're going to be adding ½ inch on the shoulder to join it to the back. At the neckline, we're not going to add up to ½ inch, we're adding 0.25 to the neckline. That is the standard for any neckline, basic neckline that you're going to be adding sewing allowance. 0.25, every other place ½ inch. Then by the side, you can decide what to add, 1 inch, 1.5, ½ inch or thereabout. Okay, so for the darts, since we're just going to be sewing what is inside, there's no sewing allowance. We're just going to mark this and transfer it into the fabric and join it together. So in my own case, I'm not going to be doing any finishing on this bodice. This is just for sewing and tutorial sake. So I'm just going to cut by the side. I'll just have add 1 inch by the side. Then every other place, armhole, at the shoulder, I'm going to add ½ inch to. And the neckline, I'm not adding anything. I'll just transfer that into my fabric and sew it. Okay, so mates, this is the front and back bodice after cutting and adding my sewing allowance. Now the next thing is for me to transfer this dart, since I'm going to be sewing it like that. So I'm going to, this is the back dart, we're going to sew it out. There are other ways to transfer it and not sew it, but here we're doing the basic bodice, so we're going to be sewing it. I'll have to mark the size of the dart and possibly give it a notch at this point. So here is not an issue. You're going to notch this part or mark it the way I've marked it, and that is where you're going to be joining it. Now for the depth of the dart, I'm going to insert a pin where the dart stops, and where my pin comes out, I'll put a mark there with my pencil, and also on this part too, like I've already done this part. So once I have this, it's just to connect from here to here, from here to here. Now for this part also, I'm going to be inserting my pin. Make sure your pattern is flat. I'm going to be inserting my pin where the dart is, right? And I'm going to use my pencil to mark on that part. I will equally bring it out. I already know where the pin's mouth is, and I'm going to be marking it. This is what I'm going to repeat on this part, the waist. I can insert the two pins at the same time so that I will not be coming back again. So once I do this, I'll flip it over and mark where the mouth of the pin is. Make sure your pencil is showing. And I'm going to bring this out here and also mark, because I have two pieces. So I have a thing like this. Now the next thing is to mark where the last point the dart is going to stop. I know somebody is asking, is this what I'm going to be doing in order to sew a dart? Yes, this is what you're going to do, except you already know how to identify your dart in your fabric, which might not be accurate. Okay, once you're able to pass through this stress, which is not even stressful, you can have a good sewing. So right now I've transferred the back dart. At this point, my zipper allowance, I added ½ inch following the back slant. So this is ready. We'll move over to the front. The same thing I did to the back, that is what I'm going to be doing to the front. I'll have to identify by marking the size of my dart at this upper part. So where the dart is going to stop, I'll still put my pins there. Like I said, go up by 2 centimeters from the bust line in case you don't have up to 2 centimeters. So I'm going to use a sharp pin so that you don't have any issues. So I'll mark this and I'll bring this open here and also mark. It already has a mouth. And this is done. The next thing is where the dart is going to be stopping for the waist dart. So basically this is what we're going to be doing to transfer the dart. I'll repeat the same thing at this point. So once this is done, we're going to remove our pattern. And if you think you need to be more accurate, all you have to do is to use your pencil and draw out your faint lines so that you know exactly what you're going to be sewing. This is if you think you're not going to be sewing something accurate without marking this. And of course, this is for beginners. So you already have a guideline of what you're going to be sewing. Do the same thing to the back and also for the back side. So the next thing to do is to pick each of the pieces, go over to a sewing machine, put them together and sew it. Okay, so I believe we know how to use the sewing machine and we can join our pieces together. So you go over to the sewing machine and sew yours while I go to sew mine, right? Please, I need to see your practicals. I need you to submit what you have sewn. The fact that you've drafted the pattern up to this point, sewing it should not be an issue. So just go over and sew it. That is when you will know if you got what you've done correctly or not. If can't see the result of what you've done, then you've actually not done anything. When you sew, kindly submit to the group and let's see what you came up with. Right? So bye for now.